How you doing? So, Pose's leaver loses the election, right? After yelling at us for months with slogans and complaining about and complain, but basically not going on podcasts, not talking to anybody, just his safe people. He loses the election. He had like a huge advantage, and then Carney threw his hat in the ring, and that was it. He was done. Mark Carney is moving into the dump, Rideau Cottage. I hear that his wife is living in Manhattan. The elbows up, apparently that is like it comes from George Orwell's 1984, and if you go to David Creighton on Twitter, he posted a video about that. So, and there he is, Mark Carney at the election with his elbows up and his Down with the Webster sweater on, DWW, singing Time to Win. It just is the most absurd thing I think I've ever seen in my life. In Canada, we have the highest strangeness going on. I think I'm just gonna share this to Twitter. Anyway, walking my dogs in the woods. Where to begin? Where to begin? I don't know. I guess we can talk about the weirdness with the money. I mean, I'm so shocked that Canadians literally voted for this Mark Carney, Liberal Canadians, mostly, you know, Ontario, Quebec. And whenever I would ask anybody about that, I'd say to them, so, you know, why aren't you worried that Alberta might separate? And, you know, don't you know that Alberta, like they pay the bills, their GDP is kind of like 46% of our GDP is from Alberta. Like, aren't you worried that if you don't vote for the Conservatives that you might cause a national unity crisis? And they're like, oh, they're always threatening that, and that'll never happen. And yesterday, Danielle Smith comes out and she announces that they have changed the Elections Act of Alberta, and they've made it a lot easier for the Citizens Initiative. They only need 10% now, which apparently is 170,000 signatures to have a referendum question. And before the end of the day, they had 200,000 signatures, and 400,000 are coming. So Alberta is going to leave. And so let's pretend that that happens and they, you know, this year, and they get their referendum and they vote. So what's going to happen when the Bank of Canada or Canadian banks want to do currency swap agreements, and the Fed looks at our collateral and says, well, just kind of like they did to European debt back in 2019, and they say, well, I'm sorry, but your collateral, we don't accept it. We don't accept Canadian bonds as collateral security. That could happen. And then how do we settle our transactions? Well, what's Mark Carney going to do? Is he going to say we need to have a digital ID and a digital currency? Or is he going to say we need to join the European Union? Like, this is not, we can't, never mind the tariffs, because the tariffs are another matter, but we just don't have we don't have the strength to fight this battle. We can't manage without Alberta. We can't manage without all the provinces together, you know, Ontario and Quebec, because they pay the bills here. We can't operate in the currency markets just as it is. Like, we don't have any productive capacity. So I just don't think we can manage for very long this way. And everything appears to me like this is kind of what is the plan, because I just don't believe what Ottawa is doing and what they're telling me. Like, they've lost all confidence in them a long time ago, and I don't trust them. And you know, the fact that Carney became the leader of the Liberal Party by canceling 250,000 votes, you know, the day before the election, is so fraudulent. Like, everything just looks so fake. Like, nothing looks believable to me. So I think that we're in for some very, you know, some very strange times coming up ahead. And I think that Trump is, I think that Trump's gonna probably, you know, he's gonna bring the hammer down on them. Come! Hurry up! So, and then Alex Craner, he was on Upthinking Finance, and he was talking about how, you know, all these countries in the Commonwealth and in the European Union, he's talking about the Canadian dollar and the Australian dollar, New Zealand, and he says it's toilet paper. Like the Canadian dollar does have resources in other, you know, we have a lot of assets to back up our, like, perceived value, future value, to back up our currency. But the Liberals won't develop it. They won't develop anything. Hi, Silver Fox. They block everything. They block all of our economic development, which is a very, you know, old strategy that colonialists do to countries, like they've done to Africa forever. And so they've done this on purpose. They have blocked our economic development on purpose. I'm not sure if it's to attack the Americans, to try and keep us not, you know, keep the Americans out, or the Europeans out. Probably the Americans. And so they've been blocking our economic development, like our roads, our rails, refineries, pipelines. They've imported, I think, over 10 million people or something like that into the country who have taken over our jobs, that they're paying for these people. They've sabotaged the Canadian people. So they don't look out, they're not looking out for the best interests of Canadians. Ottawa looks after the best interests of Europe. You know, we have been financing Europe. Like, all this money that we've sent for climate, carbon, gender advisory, LGBTQ, we've been paying for their largesse in Europe. And they allowed all these migrants to come in here, and they're destabilizing Canada from within. Now the Americans have managed to close their border, but we, the Canadian people, we have been basically sabotaged by our own federal government. Our economic development, our relationship with Western Canada. And that's why I call it strategic ambiguity. They have done it, it's all by design. And I notice that Tom Luongo is now saying that Canada is collateral security for Europe, which is what I've been saying since last year. And he's also suggesting that we could be liquidated to help Europe. So, like, that is crazy. That is just absolutely insane. I can't even believe it. So I don't see a very good future for Ottawa, and people in Alberta are worried that there could be a lot of civil unrest if they separate. So I saw some comments like that yesterday. So I suppose that could happen. Like, for example, what happened in Vancouver, right the day before the election, with the car crashing into the people. That was that's tragic, obviously. But I noticed when one of the families was being interviewed on TV, the little girl that they were saying was either injured or killed showed her in a dress with her hand like this and like a chain on her middle finger hanging. It was so weird. And the father showed no emotion. And just remember that, I think it was 2 years ago, Calgary had their main water main line for the city was sabotaged in 12 different locations, and the people had to go for months rationing water. That's the kind of stuff that happens when the governments are not trying to send messages, I suppose, or warnings to one another. You know, strange things start happening. And so if we can't do our currency swaps, if we can't settle our US dollar transactions, if Mark Carney